power system is a great way to give your manga a unique quality. If you look at most popular anime today, you will notice that they usually have a certain power system. There's Naruto with the chakra power system, there's One Piece with the devil fruit system, and there's My Hero with the quirk system, just for an example. So how do you develop your own shonen power system? That is what I will be talking about in today's video. Hi everyone, if you don't already know me, my name is Midnight Cross, and on this channel I dedicate all my videos to helping you turn your manga into a masterpiece. I'm currently working on my own manga titled Having Faith, which you might hear me talk about in today's video, but also in other videos on my channel. Now if you're new to my channel and you'd love to see more videos just like this one today, please consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon to get notified every time I upload something new. I upload a new video every Sunday and Thursday all about manga creating, and I would love to have you join me on the channel. Now first of all, before I go any further and talk about shonen power systems, I first think that the most important thing to know and the most important thing to keep in mind is Sanderson's 3 laws of magic. Now although this is more for writing magic systems, it is still something that can apply to shonen power systems, so I will be mentioning it in today's video. So the first law is, an author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. Now in the context of writing a shonen power system, this just means that the reader needs to understand the character's abilities. Your character can't just suddenly develop a new power and save the day with it. The reader would not understand where the powers came from. In order to help your readers understand, you need to show how that power system works and develop it to the point where the reader understands how it works. For example, in One Piece, if the devil fruits were never explained, then it would be so confusing to see all of the characters with so many different powers. So first of all, you need to make sure that the readers know where the power comes from in the first place. I will explain more later on how to do this. So the second law is weaknesses, limits, and costs are more important than powers. So instead of focusing on what the characters can do with powers, focus more on what they can't do. Your characters need limitations if you want them to be realistic. Having a character that is all-powerful and can do anything can get boring pretty quickly to a reader. So instead, think about what they can't do. In My Hero Academia, Deku's lack of a quirk is one of the biggest limitations at the beginning. That's an example of a weakness. In your power system, ensure that you focus more on the limitations over what they can do with their powers. Having limitations allows the character to grow and improve. Giving them big powers at the start hinders their growth over the story. And the third law of magic is, the author should expand on what is already part of the magic system before something entirely new is added, as this may otherwise entirely change how the magic systems fit into the fictional world. The best power systems are actually the most simple ones. If a power system gets too complicated, it can be hard for readers to follow, and that destroys the first law of magic, which shows how important it is for the readers to understand. So instead of adding something totally new to your power system, try developing your current system further. For example, if your current power system is focused on characters being able to gain powers from lightning, you could expand it by showing that characters can also gain more powers from other weather like the sun, rain, clouds, and so on. So instead of adding something entirely new, try expanding on what you already have to make your current system more developed. So now that we've talked about the 3 laws of magic, let's go further and talk specifically about how you can create a shonen power system for your manga, comic, or novel. My first tip is choose a power theme. Now by this I don't just mean focusing on the genres and choosing powers based off the genre. By theme I mean the overall theme of their powers. For example, in Avatar, the theme of their powers is based off elements. That's a good example of a theme in a power system. So as other examples for themes for shonen power systems, you could have a theme based off the stars, based off astrology, based off mythological gods and goddesses, based off animals, plants, colors, and so on. The theme is something as simple as that. It's just to group it a lot easier and make it much easier to develop your power system further. If you look at the most popular shonen power systems, you will notice that there's usually a main theme that is followed. Having a theme for your powers keeps things consistent and helps you not to stray from your basic power system. The second step to developing a power system is to understand where the power comes from. What is the source of your character's powers? Powers can of course come from training. A character can train themselves, and over the course of their training, they can develop powers. A lot of shonen characters actually develop their powers through this method. They train themselves, and over the course of the story, they get more powerful. A good example of this is Saitama from One Punch Man. He is the most powerful hero, and he only got his powers through training himself. Powers can also come from another outside source, which is the case for a lot of power systems. A character could gain powers through harnessing energy. Or maybe they were given their powers through a divine being. Maybe they can gain powers through using a certain item or object. There are countless ways a character could gain powers. It might help if you list various ways a character in your story could develop powers and then choose one system that works the best. It doesn't really have to be overcomplicated. If you look at most shonen power systems, the source of power is usually something quite simple. Some people just might be born with powers, or some might have to do something in order to gain powers. But overall, this step is about choosing where those powers come from and deciding what the source of your character's powers are. My third step to creating a shonen power system is decide on the limit. What is their weakness? What is the limit to your character's powers? If you have an all-powerful character that can never be defeated, it does actually get boring after a while. You really don't want to have an overpowered character because that becomes unrealistic over the course of the story. If a character has no room to grow and develop and change over a story, then it feels like that character is just way too powerful and it makes it not as interesting to your readers. So instead of having a character that is way too powerful, try and find their weaknesses and their limits and put more of a focus on that. Their weakness should actually be more important than them having impressive powers, and that is one of Sanderson's laws of magic. It is important to make a character weaker and give your character limits because it gives them room to grow over your story. So let me give you some examples of weaknesses in a character's powers. One example is that a character may have fire powers, but every time it rains, they cannot use their powers. They cannot use their powers when they are around water. Another example is a character might be born with powers, but at a certain time every year or month they lose their powers. Another example is that a character may have a time limit to their powers, and after they've used their powers for that time limit, they then have to spend some time to recharge before they can use their abilities again. Your character might only have powers at night, and when it's daytime their powers disappear. So those are just some examples of how you can limit or weaken a character's powers, but of course there are so many examples of ways you can limit a character's powers. I recommend you choose 1 or 2 ways to keep your character's powers limited and in check in order to keep your character from becoming too overpowered. Even with a simple limitation, see if you can try and develop that limitation further in order to limit your character's powers and consider their weaknesses further. Now my 4th step to creating a power system is consider what other powers there are in the world. Your power system should not only relate to your main character, but also tie into the rest of your world building. Creating a power system is a part of world building after all. Your character's powers could make sense, but if no one else in your world has powers, your readers might wonder why your character was specifically chosen to have these powers. So you really need to decide how your power system ties into the rest of the world. So in My Hero Academia, this is explained through the fact that much of the population are born with quirks. This is also explained in One Piece, where certain people can eat devil fruit and gain powers. This is also explained in Naruto with the chakra system. So overall, you want to decide how much your power system relates to the rest of the world. And logically, if your character has powers, it would make sense for others to have certain powers as well. Consider, does your character have to hide their powers from others? Or is their powers and other powers something more widely recognized in the world? Consider this and add power systems as something that is more important in your world building as you develop your world further. My 5th step to creating a shonen power system is to consider the effects of the powers. Again, this relates a lot to the theme and also to the world building as well. How your characters use their powers and how it affects the world is really also not about the character, but also about the rest of the world. Along this line of thought as well, you also want to consider if a character would use their powers positively or negatively. A character with fire powers may choose to burn down buildings and cause carnage, or they could use their fire powers to make areas warmer and light dark places. A character with electricity powers could electrocute people, or they could use their powers to run a city. So a character's powers can affect a world and other characters in various ways. Showing how a character's powers affect the world can really add a lot to regular world building and make your readers understand your world a lot better and feel like they are more of a part of it. To creating a shonen power system is to consider what does the power look like in use. Since this video is more about manga and comics, the appearance of that power and how the character looks when using the power is also something that's very important. If you're making a power look flashy and interesting, then your character should also have enough development behind that power as well. Also, when designing an appearance of a power, it should also tie into the overall theme of the power. So in Sailor Moon, since their powers are based off the different planets and their respective planets, their designs are also designed based off those planets. If the theme of your powers was based off color, then each of your characters might have a different sort of color theme, and also their powers may also be different colors. If the theme of your power system is more based off plants, then your characters' designs and their powers would probably be based off their respective plants. Overall, the appearance of the power and the appearance of the character when using that power should be based off the previous things you have developed. So my 7th step to developing a power system is to consider what are the consequences of your characters using these powers. What is the consequence? In order to go further with your power system, you need to consider the consequence. There should be an exchange. In exchange for your characters having these powers, there should also be something that is lost. Now, it doesn't have to be a big loss, but usually if you look at a power system, there is usually some kind of loss. So if a character uses their powers too much, they could become weakened. Perhaps the more they use their powers, the more risk there is of that character dying. In exchange for their amazing powers, they might lose something else. These are just examples of consequence in exchange for powers. Powers shouldn't be given to a character without reason. It could just be a simple reason, like in exchange for powers, the character must fight and protect others, which is usually a common reason. Or it could be a much more dire reason, like a character slowly getting weaker the more they use their powers. So my 8th step to creating a power system is consider who is the natural villain. Who is the natural villain in this power system? Now this might be a little bit hard to understand just based off that, but let me explain. With anything, there is always good and evil, and that should be the same when you are developing a power system. If a character was given powers, there would likely be a risk of that character either using their powers for good or using it for bad things. So as you are developing your power system, you might stumble across a way to sort of divide the system and see how a natural villain could be developed. Consider how you could divide your power system into groups and categorize it a bit better to see who the natural villain is. So for example, there could be a power system where different groups of characters can use light and dark powers. Now in this example, you might say that the light characters are the good ones and the dark characters are the bad ones. You could also use this to twist things and put things in a different direction. Maybe a character with light powers ends up using their abilities for bad things. Or maybe a character with dark powers ends up using their abilities for good things. So that is one example of how you could divide a power system into a natural villain and the natural good. And you can do this with other things as well. Maybe there are, again, maybe you could divide the characters' powers based off colors. So maybe there's characters who have, pink powers. Maybe there's characters with green powers. And each of those various categories of powers all have certain abilities and certain characteristics. So when looking at your power system, consider who the natural villain may be. And to put an interesting spin on things, it doesn't always have to be the natural villain that you may suspect. The next step to creating a shonen power system is to base a character's new abilities off abilities they already have. Giving a character extra powers can get confusing really quickly. If a character has a certain power, it should stay that way. However, if you want to give your characters a certain upgrade or a new power, their new powers should also tie into the abilities they already have. For example, if someone already had water powers, it might get confusing if you give them fire powers all of a sudden. If you give your character those powers, your readers may quickly begin to wonder, well, what can't your character do? And then that ends up breaking one of Sanderson's laws. You want to sort of follow the powers your character already has. So instead of having a character with water abilities suddenly gain fire abilities, you might want to consider your character gaining more water abilities and sort of being able to, maybe instead of just being able to shoot water at things, now they can cast a whole tsunami, and that would be an upgrade to the powers they already have. If you do this, then it keeps with your original power system. With the power system you have developed, it makes sense for your characters to be able to upgrade the powers they already have, rather than just develop completely new abilities. Always focus on being more precise when developing powers rather than exaggerating things and overpowering your characters. For example, if a character has powers where they can transform into a magical girl, then maybe the next upgrade is that your characters can sort of have a different kind of transformation and go up another rank. Like in Yuki Yuna is a Hero, which is an anime I recently saw and really loved. So whatever your character's previous powers were, if you want to give them new abilities and further develop those powers, try and think about what abilities they had and what would be the next logical transformation they should have based off their initial powers. The 10th step to creating a shonen power system is consider what is the history behind the powers. Since power systems are so strongly tied into world building, it would make sense then for a power system to have history behind it. So maybe the power system in your story is something that is passed down for generations. Maybe characters in your story who have powers are worshipped or shunned by the rest of the world. Maybe there is a tradition in your story behind characters using their powers. It could even be a celebration generated in your world building based off the power system you have created. So having a history behind your power system can make your power system feel more realistic. When someone is reading it, they can see the history and it's more well established in your story. And my final tip number 11, is how does this power system affect the story? So now that you've developed a power system, you want to be able to tie that power system effectively into your story. Instead of info dumping your readers with all of this information and just saying, here, this is the power system, this is what my characters do. Instead of doing that, which can become a bit overwhelming to a reader suddenly entering your story, instead you want to sort of break it down into the plot and slowly introduce the power system as you go through your plot. So you can slowly introduce your power system by incorporating it into your world building. So when your readers look at your world, if your world is run based off powers, then they might see characters using their powers in their day-to-day lives. Maybe certain aspects of your world building are run through these characters using their powers. Also consider what you can add to a plot through your character using their powers. Consider what conflicts or different difficulties may arise through your character using their powers. Even though you want to have a really well-developed power system, the power system shouldn't be the main focus of the story. The power system should be there alongside the main plot of your story to really add to your story and make it more entertaining and exciting for your readers. The power system should be there to add to the main focus and make your story more entertaining and interesting overall. Thank you so much for watching my video today, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please let me know in the comment section down below. Let me know what kind of power system you're developing for your own manga, because I would love to hear about it. Feel free to chat with me on any of my social media at @MidnightCross. I always enjoy hearing from you. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!